YouTube, Justin, Finest Listography, episode number 4, my top 25 fantasy football players for 2012. Number 25 is Larry Fitzgerald, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. Fitzgerald over the last few seasons has been very consistent, and he's been consistently near the top of wide receivers in terms of fantasy value. However, I still consider him slightly overrated, and I have to consider who's throwing him the football. It's either going to be Kevin Cobb or John Skelton all season unless they pick somebody else up. Maybe Kurt Warner is willing to come back out of retirement, but based on the fact that he doesn't have a great quarterback or quarterback tandem throwing him the football, and they've got fewer weapons on Arizona now than they have in those years when Fitzgerald was putting up these great numbers, can't put him any higher than number 25 on the list. Number 24 is Frank Gore, running back for the San Francisco 49ers. Frank Gore made me a believer with their playoff run, and he was one of just 5 running backs in 2011 that had at least 280 carries of the football. So you always, in fantasy, always want to look for these high-volume running backs, and Frank Gore is a great late second, third, maybe even fourth round option for you. Number 23 is Darren Sproles, running back for the New Orleans Saints. Darren Sproles is the ultimate scat back in the NFL. There were only 6 players at any position in the NFL last season that had more receptions than Darren Sproles, and he tacked on around 600 yards rushing. So especially if you're playing in a league that rewards points per reception, you absolutely want to target Darren Sproles. Number 22, Andre Johnson, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. Andre Johnson is a very good player. However, there are a lot of mouths to feed in Houston. Andre Johnson's been a little injury prone over the last couple of seasons, playing with a high carry running back in Arian Foster, who of course we're going to talk about a little bit later. And his quarterback, Matt Schaub, is a little injury-prone himself. If you add all those things up and do the math, Andre Johnson is a risky play. However, he does have a high ceiling if everything falls in line for him. So he's on the list, but I couldn't justify putting him any higher than number 22. Number 21, Greg Jennings, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. Greg Jennings is an absolute jewel in what I still consider to be one of the best offenses in football in Green Bay. To say that another 75 reception, 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdown season, it should be a lock for him so long as he, as well as Aaron Rodgers, stay healthy. Number 20 is Jimmy Graham, tight end for the New Orleans Saints. It is not at all out of the question to assume that the number 2 tight end in football should be in line for or eclipse that 1,000 yards and 10 touchdown numbers, which are elite numbers at this position in fantasy football. Number 19 is Marshawn Lynch, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. No answer has yet been found for beast mode. 300 touches plus, 1,000 yards plus, 10 to 12 scores. Marshawn Lynch can serve as your running back 1, especially if you're drafting late in a 10 or 12 team draft. If your first round pick, you're looking for your running back 1, Marshawn Lynch can be a great steal for you at that point. Number 18 is Matt Forte, running back for the Chicago Bears. Certainly capable of 300 touches and 1,500 yards from scrimmage. Due to his scatback abilities, he is a very solid pass catcher. Definitely, again, going to be more valuable in points per reception leagues. You can probably knock him up a couple of spots on your draft board if your league rewards you for pass receptions. Number 17, Michael Vick, quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, whether you like him or not. Michael Vick is going to need to curb his injury issues and be a more selective passer in 2012 if he wants to even get close to the fantasy value that he had in 2010. But Michael Vick is on a team where he is surrounded by immense talent. You're talking Deshaun Jackson, Lesean McCoy. There's a lot of talent on this team. So Michael Vick is more than capable with both his arm as well as his feet of getting back close to those numbers in 2010. Number 16, Chris Johnson, running back for the Tennessee Titans. He's good, but he has had 2 straight seasons of a significant dip in production. And in 2011, he had 0 touchdowns between weeks 14 and 17, and that is fantasy playoff time. That is a time when your top-tier guys cannot lay an egg. And last year, Chris Johnson laid an egg in fantasy playoff time. He's got a high ceiling. He's a very good player, but he is also a risky play, and that's why I couldn't put him any higher. Number 15, Roddy White, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. Only Roddy White and Wes Welker topped 100 receptions in 2011, and he could very easily repeat his numbers from last season, which was 100 receptions, 1,200 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. Could very easily match or top those numbers. Number 14, Wes Welker, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. The argument can be made that Wes Welker is the most valuable wide receiver, running back, or tight end in leagues that reward you per reception. Wes Welker led the league in receptions last year by 20. It wasn't even close between him and Roddy White. Roddy White had 100. Wes Welker, I believe, had 121. So Wes Welker is definitely, in my opinion, the most valuable PPR player in fantasy football. Number 13 is Stafford, quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Stafford topped 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in 2011. Great numbers for a quarterback. He throws a lot of interceptions. He's thrown 37 interceptions in 29 career games, but he's also throwing to the best wide receiver in football in Calvin Johnson. So you certainly can't sleep on Stafford. He definitely has the ability to repeat those numbers from last season. Number 12 is Rob Gronkowski, tight end for the New England Patriots. He is head and shoulders the best tight end in football, being thrown to frequently and in the red zone by a super accurate quarterback in Tom Brady. That's how you get a tight end that had, I believe, 17 touchdowns in the regular season last year. More than a touchdown a game. Rob Gronkowski, the best tight end option in fantasy football. Number 11, Adrian Peterson, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. He actually increased his yards per carry during his last 2 seasons. In his last 2 seasons, he's also missed 5 games, so he's missed a little bit of time. But even if he does miss time, 10 to 12 touchdowns is usually a lock for him. Even in the seasons that he's missed a game or 2, he's hit at least 10 touchdowns, if not more. So 10 to 12 touchdowns should be a lock for Adrian Peterson, and he is a very solid option as your number 1 running back. Number 10 is Cam Newton, quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. He is going to be hard-pressed in his sophomore season to match the numbers that he put up last year as a rookie. 4,000 yards and 20 touchdowns, plus 700 yards on the ground and 14 rushing touchdowns. Those numbers are magic. Cam Newton had a great season. He is going to be hard-pressed to sort of stay out of that sophomore slump, but based on the rapport that he's got with Steve Smith, he's made Steve Smith relevant again in fantasy football. Based on that rapport and based on the talent that I know Cam Newton has, he is capable of repeating those numbers. It'll just be a little bit tough for him, but take a chance on him. Number 9 is MJD, Maurice Jones-Drew, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's had 3 straight seasons with between 1,600 and 1,900 yards from the scrimmage. He is super durable. He's only missed a couple of games in his last 2 or 3 seasons. He is in the middle of a contract dispute right now, which might shy some fantasy owners away. Let me attempt to reassure you, I highly doubt that his contract negotiation issues are going to have any bearing on his fantasy value for this season. So draft MJD in the 1st round with confidence. Number 8 is Ryan Mathews, running back for the San Diego Chargers. 275 touches. This is around what you should be looking for. 275 touches of the ball, that's rushes and receptions. Looking for around 1,500 yards from scrimmage, and I think he's more than capable of hitting that number. Needs to correct his fumbleitis to sort of get up there higher on the list. He's got 10 fumbles in 2 seasons. That is a lot. So he really needs to correct that, and that hurts his fantasy value as well, because pretty well every league is going to penalize a point or 2 for a fumble. He's got to correct that to really be pushed up into the elite level of running backs. Number 7 is Calvin Johnson, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. One of only 5 receivers with 90 or more catches in 2011. Led the league in receiving yards with a little over 1,600, and he was number 2 in receiving touchdowns with 16. Calvin Johnson is the best receiver, wide receiver, tight end, or otherwise. Best receiver available in fantasy football. If you have the opportunity to get him in maybe even the second round. Depending on your league structure, it might be worth going out and snagging Calvin Johnson to really shore up your wide receiver core. Number 6 is Tom Brady, quarterback for the New England Patriots. 5,000 yards last season, and he did so in fewer passes than the other two quarterbacks to top 5,000 yards, Drew Brees and Stafford. His accuracy has hovered around 65 to 66% in his last 3 seasons, so he's an extremely consistent and reliable option at quarterback. I've drafted Tom Brady the last couple of seasons, and it's turned out quite well for me. He is a very solid QB1 option across all formats. Number 5 is Drew Brees, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. My only concern with Drew Brees is the fact that he's thrown over 1,800 passes in his last 3 seasons. He's averaging about 600 pass attempts a season. So that's a lot of wear and tear on that arm, but at the same time, I also don't really see any signs of him slowing down. Other than that, Drew Brees is a tank, and he's going to continue to be a tank, I'm sure, putting up comparable numbers to his last few seasons. Number 4 is Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is the most complete and the most dangerous quarterback in football, fantasy, or real. He can throw passes with Drew Brees. He can take off and run the ball. He's a constant threat to run the ball. I think he put up 3 rushing touchdowns last year. Target Aaron Rodgers. If you play in leagues like I do that really value quarterbacks, it's really Aaron Rodgers and maybe Drew Brees and then everybody else in terms of fantasy value. So if you get the opportunity to target Aaron Rodgers and get Aaron Rodgers in the first or even the second round, take it. Number 3 is Lesean Mccoy, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Lesean McCoy last season had the fewest rushing attempts to top 1,200 yards than any other running back who topped 1,200 yards had more rush attempts than did Lesean McCoy. And he also led the league in rushing touchdowns with 17 in 2011. Lesean McCoy was a hoss for me in my couple of my leagues last year. And he is an absolute cinch to top 300 touches again. 300 touches a season, as long as he stays healthy, 300 touches will be nothing for Lesean McCoy. Number 2 is Arian Foster, running back for the Houston Texans. That may surprise some people that he's not number 1. He seems to be a consensus number 1 on a lot of lists. The fact of the matter is, Arian Foster did see a drop in production in 2011, but you also have to take into account that he missed 3 games. Any league format, Arian Foster is a tank and will get you probably 1,300 yards and between 10 and 12 touchdowns, and might even get another touchdown or 2 receiving. However, the reason he is number 2 is because of who is my number 1. And my number 1 fantasy football player in 2012 is Ray Rice, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Ray Rice's breakout 2011 campaign is nothing but a sign of things to come. Ray Rice is the complete package. He's low to the ground, which makes it, just like Maurice Jones-Drew, makes it a little harder to see over top of his blockers. He runs the ball very effectively. He's an effective pass catcher. He blocks. He's very durable. He hasn't missed a game in the last 3 seasons. Ray Rice will anchor your fantasy team to glory. If I get any first overall picks this year, I am for sure going to be drafting Ray Rice. That's it. YouTube, Justin, Finest Listography, Episode 4, my top 25 fantasy football players for 2012. Just a reminder to everybody, my contest closes on June the 30th. Remember, if you enter the contest, and I've described a couple of different places how to do it, you can win this promo sheet, autographed and personalized on the back. Contest closes the 30th of June.